Hello and welcome. I'm Dan Rogers. I'm the Executive Director for the Kelowna Chamber of Commerce, and it's my privilege to welcome you today to this, the second of a series of all-candidate forums that we are hosting to focus on the three ridings in the Central Okanagan: Okanagan-Mission, Okanagan West, and Okanagan Lake Country. At this moment, we are welcoming two candidates that are joining us that are seeking election to public office. They will be more formally introduced by themselves. Renee Merrifield, representing the BC Liberals, and Amanda Poon, who will represent the BC Green. We'll hear more from those candidates as we continue. First off, though, I do want to acknowledge that we are gathered on the unceded traditional territory of the Sea-Ilks Okanagan people. We want to thank them for their rich heritage and contributions to our economy, our social way of life here in the Central Okanagan. I also want to start by thanking our partners here at SW Event Technology. We have, and I've said that we've overused the word pivot, but we have made changes. Normally we would do this in person with a live audience. We have not done that on this occasion because of COVID-19 and because of the short timelines. We've been able to work with our longtime partner, SW Event Technology, to put this all candidates forum together for you, and we want to thank them for making that possible. We are coming and streaming to you live from their studio in warehouse studio in downtown Kelowna. A good example of how this local business has made changes to adjust to the challenges that many businesses are seeing as a result of COVID-19. We'd also want to make a note that we have followed strict protocols with respect to COVID-19 to make today's forum possible. We are practicing appropriate social distancing. Both candidates, upon entering, have been given distance between each other and exercise that throughout the staff. There's been thorough cleaning. We had a forum just before this. We've gone through those steps, and we just wanted to remind people that we've been active to ensure that we followed those protocols. This is the second of three forums, as mentioned. The last one will take place at 3 o'clock today. If you want to join us live, you can do so through the Chamber website again, and we will make all three of these forums available through our YouTube channel, likely a little bit later today. So lots of opportunity not only to watch this, but also watch the other forums that we are recording today at any time at your leisure, and share those with your potential audiences, particularly if you have not yet made up your mind with the upcoming provincial election. We want to thank our presenting sponsor, the Okanagan Mainline Real Estate Board. We would not be able to do this forum without the support of our stakeholders. This is a real sign of what many organizations have focused on because of the pandemic, though it was occurring before, and that's about collaboration. So the Okanagan Mainline Real Estate Board is our presenting sponsor, and we want to hear a word from them.
Hi everyone and welcome. My name is Kim Heisman and I am the president of the Okanagan Mainline Real Estate Board, and we are very pleased to again be the presenting sponsor of the Kelowna Chamber All Candidates Forum in Kelowna.
Well, thanks very much to Kim and the Okanagan Mainline Real Estate Board. We will hear from Kim a little bit later. She brings a question your way. We also want to thank the BC Fruit Growers Association, who have also assisted us today by sponsoring. Thank you also goes out to our co-hosts, UDI, the Canadian Home Builders Association of Central Okanagan, and we could also not do this without the support of other organizations like Tourism Kelowna and Downtown Kelowna, who have helped us in formulating questions and issues that we'll put before you today. So I've gone through the rules in advance with both candidates. We have, just for those that have joined us, if you haven't heard previously, we have three sets of questions to go through. The first relate to positions that are part of BC Chamber or Kelowna Chamber policy. The second set have been contributed by our stakeholders, and the third set have been submitted by members and those in the business community. So we'll work through those. Because there's just two of you, we have a lot of time for you, though I do expect we'll complete this in just over an hour. We have the latitude of going a little bit longer than that if we require it. So the first responder to a question will get a minute and a half to respond, and then the subsequent response will be 60 seconds, and we'll work that way going back and forth. In advance of the start of our session today, we did a quick poll test to see which number they could choose that was closest to 5, and that would determine where we will start. We will start with Renee Merrifield, and we'll get to that in a moment. Though before doing that, I did want to acknowledge that we did reach out to the NDP candidate. We were working feverishly several times to get a date and a time that would be appropriate for Krystal Smith. Unfortunately, despite looking at alternate dates and times, we were informed several times, including the latest yesterday, that she will not be able to participate. On the other side of that, that will give us a little bit more time to spend with each of you. So we're going to begin and kick things off. Thanks again for both of you for joining us here. We're going to kick things off with opening introductions, and as mentioned, we drew before, and we'll start, Renee, if you could, 2 minutes for your introduction.
Perfect. Thank you. My name is Renee Merrifield, and I'm proud to represent the BC Liberals in the Kelowna-Mission riding. I came to the Okanagan 25 years ago, and I was coming as a university graduate on a wing and a prayer with a lot of debt and not much by way of jobs. So I started my own company and started it as a consulting firm, and what is now known as Troika began 22 years ago, and it has expanded across Western Canada. I'm very proud of what we've been able to accomplish in Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Alberta, but mostly here. And this is where we call home. So our head office is here, but as well, I've called the Kelowna-Mission riding my home for the last 20 years. I have also been dedicated to our community, and whether that was serving on the Regional District Economic Development Commission, West Bank First Nations Economic Development Commission, the Premier's Economic Council for 4.5 years, Interior Health Authority Board for 3.5 years, or the UBCO Advisory Council for the last 8 years. I have dedicated my life service to our community and to making sure that we have the best policies, the best representation, and the best advocacy moving forward. Beyond that, I've also dedicated myself to philanthropic endeavors. And one of those is the Breakfast Club of Canada, in which I actually brought the club out of the east all the way out to the west. And currently we are the 3rd largest UN feeding organization in the world and the largest Indigenous feeding organization. So very proud of those 350,000 kids every morning that we feed breakfast to and have done so in this pandemic. So as your MLA, I will definitely be a voice. I will definitely be a strategic thinker and someone who will bring you that loud, proud advocacy that I have done so over the course of the last 25 years. Thanks.
Thanks very much. Amanda, over to you for introductory remarks.
Thank you. I'm Amanda Poon, and I'm a first-time candidate running for the BC Green Party. I came to Kelowna 30 years ago with my family. And we came from Edmonton, like a lot of people from Kelowna. My brother and I were the kind of kids who needed food stamps or a breakfast club back in the day. So my family came to Kelowna looking for a better life, looking for opportunity, and we found it in West Kelowna. We were very grateful after living in our vehicle for quite some time to find a home on a Bible camp in West Kelowna. And there I just became very connected to the land. I threw myself into fishing and hunting and just living outside as much as I could, taking care of nature and animals. And I've gone on to study business and accounting at Okanagan College and get a bachelor's degree from the University of Victoria. I am the current president of the Downtown Knox Mountain Neighborhood Association, a former board member of One Big Table, which is a cooperative grocery store that sought to support local producers and champion the wonderful local products that we have in the Okanagan Valley. I'm a dedicated volunteer. Last winter, my most recent volunteering was with the Welcome and Shelter, but I've always been a grassroots organizer as well and community leader. So I've been organizing meal trains and supports for the people living in tents in our ballpark. And I do whatever I can to help people who need it. And I'm excited to be running in this election because I think that this role is one of the greatest opportunities to scale up the help that I want to give people and to apply my background Because, like many people in Kelowna, you have to hustle. I've had so many jobs and positions, everything from agriculture. I was in urban farming. I worked for a local family business, an Italian family that schooled me in business, and we supplied restaurants. And so I think my background in business and my compassion for the less fortunate are a good mix for what we need today.
Well, thanks to both of you for opening remarks, and I'm going to back up a little bit because I'm sure I threw our crew off a little bit because I did miss a couple of slides that I was going to make reference to, just to give some information to voters, particularly around where advanced voting can take place. Just a reminder, if those are tuning in, make sure you reach out to others. Obviously, if you're watching live, you care about this election, and congratulations to you on that. But ensure that others also understand there are plenty of opportunities to participate in this democratic process. Advanced voting will close tomorrow, so be aware of that. And general voting day is on Saturday, October 24th. And all you have to do is check the Elections BC website to find out where your polling station. You should have that information already. If you haven't been given that information, if you previously participated, you likely should reach out to Elections BC to ensure that takes place. We also want to thank our President's Circle members that have made this event possible. They support the ongoing work of the Chamber. That includes Interior Savings, UBC Okanagan, MMP, BDO, and most recently Rogers Communications. These are local organizations that are helping us as a federally incorporated nonprofit manage and support very many small businesses and bring events like this that take a little bit in resources to put together. So with that housekeeping put aside, let's jump into the questions and the issues that are important to the constituents in this riding, and we'll begin, Ms. Merrifield, with yourself, and this is on the subject of taxation. The BC Chamber has identified tax reform, and I might have to use my glasses a little bit, aimed at making us more competitive as a jurisdiction. As one of the top priorities, they identified this in the submission to the BC government. This includes, as identified by the BC Chamber, consideration of a value-added tax. Also forgiving EHT payments for a short period at least, and raising the exemption level for the EHT to the threshold of 1.5 million in payroll. These are just some of the examples that the BC Chamber has identified to help small businesses not only in the short term, but in the longer term, making BC more competitive as a jurisdiction. With that said, if elected, would you support any of these initiatives? And if not, what other tax proposals do you have to stimulate the economy and make BC more competitive? To start this off, you have a minute and a half.
A minute and a half doesn't feel long enough, but thank you. So first and foremost, as a small business owner, we've felt the pinch, we felt the hurt, and the EHT has definitely been one of those pinch points for all of us. But we, as the BC Liberals, are committed to making that better, to getting rid of government and really getting out of the way of small business. But that also means getting out of the taxation of small business. And we are committed to removing the small business tax, which is 2% right now. In addition to that, we're also eliminating the PST for a full year. Governments don't bring back economies, consumers do. And consumer confidence absolutely needs to increase. So we are committed to making sure that for that full year, we're going to put everything on sale and really increase the competitive advantage of those that are in BC running businesses here as well. In addition to that, we are also committed to doing a full review of all of the taxes. As we know, under the NDP government, the EHT was one of them, but that's only one of the taxes that has come into being. We've actually got another 23 that we could talk about today. And one of those is the speculation tax. Anyone who has been in the housing industry or near the housing industry, or anyone who has a family place that's here in the Okanagan, we've experienced what that's done not only to our own places of residence or places of resort, but also what it's done to our relationship with Alberta.
Thank you. Ms. Poon.
The economy of British Columbia is very sophisticated. This is not a dollar store. So when we just slash and discount the value of the labor of our workers and discount the value of our precious resources, that it has unintended costs. My economics professor always said there's no such thing as a free lunch. So what we get a deal on today, we pay for tomorrow. So I don't support, and my party does not support, just slashing things across the board. The PST is a regressive tax in that it doesn't target the people that actually need it, which is right now, low-income earners and small and mid-sized businesses. This is not the time to be giving corporate welfare to foreign multinational corporations. This is the time that we support the people who are working around us here. So we have looked as a party at specific targeted PST cuts. I know voters want to hear cuts across the board, but we need to be smart. We need to cut on building supplies, we need to cut on green economic recovery, but we don't want to lose anything in that process.
So if I could, I, as moderator, as advised, will use opportunities as they arise to seek clarity on specific issues, and I will do that now, and I'll provide both an opportunity to provide a short response, and if you could keep your responses short. With respect to that, and there has been identification of there is a potential cost to government if there is the action on the PST. So that is not revenue that flows in. So what does that mean? So it's the area of deficits and debts, and maybe you can both clarify, are we to expect in the longer term debt and large deficits going forward, or what is the plan to address some of those issues? We'll start, Renee, because with respect to the PST primarily.
For sure. So there is a cost to government, but it's not an additional cost in terms of what it costs to administer a tax. So with a wave of a magic wand, it literally goes to zero. Having said that, we're in a wartime right now. We need dire and excessive measures to really stimulate the economy, and that's what the BC Liberals are prepared to do.
And again, on the issue of deficit then?
So this cut over 2 years is going to cost us $11 billion in revenue, and that it will obviously impact services. What happens and what we see in Kelowna is those costs get shifted to the municipality. So those austerity measures of the BC Liberals for 16 years are why the city of Kelowna is experiencing grave issues around homelessness and mental illness and healthcare cuts. And the Journey Home strategy itself is over $150K a year. So you're paying somehow. You're just coming out of a different pocket.
Thanks, and you touched on a number of issues we'll get into as we get further into the discussion, so thank you for both on that. The next question will be around the issue and as raised about affordable housing. Ms. Poon, we'll begin with you on this question for a minute and a half. Affordable housing seems to be more of a dream than ever before as we enter 2021 and beyond. A 2019 MMP study commissioned by the Canadian Home Builders Association in BC found that on average, on a new home sale, $94,000 in taxes is collected by all three levels of government. Do you believe that one way to make housing more affordable would be to scratch that surface and examine ways to actually reduce the amount of taxes that's extracted from housing as a means to make it more affordable? Or what other strategies do you have, if not that, to address affordable housing for the average working families?
Our party has looked at taxation reform. We agree that property taxes cannot be the only source of revenue, and development cost charges can't be the only source of revenue to fund critical infrastructure. It's just not a diversified economic stream. We do, as a government, need to look at actual affordability. As someone with many direct family members who've been homeless, I've been living in a vehicle and campgrounds myself. We lived at Tween Lakes. This affordability problem isn't going to be solved by having cheaper cabinets in a mansion in Kettle Valley. The affordability problem needs to target the people who are actually one paycheck away from being homeless. And so our party is not looking at making life easier for those at the very top in the hopes it'll trickle down. We know that never happens. We know that's a myth. We are looking at going back to co-op housing. There are hardworking people my age, my generation, who want to put a down payment on a house. We want to go build that house ourselves. My family worked in construction. My stepfather was a general contractor. My first job was cleaning job sites. We want to do the work. We want to do the down payment, but we're being barred access because of mortgage rates and mortgage rules. So co-op housing is something that people need to be able to enter, and we need policies that don't just support heteronormative families with 2 double incomes and kids. We need policies so that a single person, which I was until I got married last year, can have a hope and a dream of even entering the market.
Thank you. And for 60 seconds on the issue.
Awesome. We do need to lower taxes. We need to lower the layering effect that taxation has had. I'm going to take exception to my colleague in the Green Party. It's not just the Kettle Valley resident that's experiencing this. A subsidized housing unit has those $94,000 of taxation from all 3 levels of government, exactly the same as a Kettle Valley resident would. So we need to get serious about what we're doing about the layering effect of taxation. But we also need to get serious about what we're doing as an economy. If we don't think that the forestry industry has an effect on what we're doing with housing, I can tell you in the last 30 days, the housing pricing has increased by $30,000 per home because of lumber increases. We cannot afford to keep going with this trajectory, and we need to get out of the way and make sure that our housing is delivered in a timely fashion with an increase in supply to really affect affordability positively.
Thank you, and that's the first couple. And I will say, if some are joining us late, we did expect 3 candidates. I'm conscious that despite repeated efforts over the last week to communicate with the NDP candidate, they have chosen not to participate in this forum. That creates a challenge. I don't want it to be a debate between 2, a debate around policies. And I will try to find the balance to not defend nor justify any of their policies. But as we go through, I may make mention of current government policy, and your perspectives on that would be worthwhile. Also, just to let you know, at any time, if you want me to repeat a question, some of these are a little longer than others, feel free to jump in. I don't mind doing that. So we move on to the next section. This is our first part, but the third question, this is around transportation. Then we switch back, and Ms. Merrifield, you'll begin with this one with a minute and a half. With all the attention that climate change is getting, how important do you believe it is for the province to be investing in highway improvements that would allow commercial vehicles to flow much more smoothly through the Kelowna-West Kelowna corridor and in Lake Country, I would imagine as well, rather than forcing diesel trucks to stop and start more than a couple dozen times at every controlled intersection, spewing noxious diesel fuel in the air. It's been observed as an issue for those that are in the transportation sector, but broadly, transportation in the corridor, how important is it, and what would you suggest, if elected, you would do to address that issue?
It is a huge issue, and it does increase our carbon footprint. Transportation corridors are not simply for trucks, however. Transportation corridors are for goods and services and people for our future. So whether or not we build a truck corridor for today, that might become our light rail transportation corridor for tomorrow. So we need to get serious about making sure that we are moving goods, services, and people with the most modern technology possible at all times. Under the NDP government, our second crossing committee was disbanded. And that is one thing that I would bring back immediately. We need to start having these conversations today so that we can make sure that we've got the movement of goods and services and people as much as possible, and that we're planning for that future. It increases the cost of our living to have people and to have those trucks sitting on our highway system. And we need to get serious about making sure that we're moving things forward.
Thank you. And for a response on the transportation?
Yeah, 40% of the greenhouse gas emissions in our area come from transportation. And a lot of that is commercial logistics. When I worked in the food industry, I specialized in logistics and supply chain management. And a lot of local producers actually use the Greyhound, because if you're looking at fresh mozzarella from a little farm in a Soyuz, or all these amazing producers, mushrooms, you need it to get it quick, but you can't pack a lot. So we do need to work on supply logistics, but making more roads is not the solution, because we need a guarantee that there's actually going to be a measurable plan to reduce those emissions. If you make a bigger road, you just fill it up with more cars. So what we need to do is subsidize people to actually move to zero emission commercial and government vehicles. So that's an example of a targeted PST cut. If your business is if you're moving to those fleets, then we should give you a break. But we can't solve that problem by building things our children are going to be tearing up in the future.
Thank you. So we move on to the next one, and Ms. Poon, will begin this one with you. What do you believe are the most important issues for this particular riding, and what would you or your party, if elected and in power, do to make lives better for the potential constituents in Kelowna-Mission?
So there's the big picture problems, climate change, the pandemic, economic crises, but there's also the daily problems that we face. So people are not trying to save the world, they're just trying to get to the end of the month. So we need to target our resources directly to helping small and mid-sized businesses that are located in our community. Businesses that keep their profits in our community, not the corporations, not the companies in Alberta or in the United States that take money out of our community, but the people who own and operate local companies, because these are the people that coach our kids in sports. These are the people that are on the PAC teams, they donate, they volunteer. And so the local families and the local businesses, we are going to help them through targeted bridge loans as well as subsidies. So the next 6 months for business, again, coming from the food industry, January and February are dead normally. And that's when everybody goes on vacation normally. So I'm worried. One of my good friends, his restaurant is closing for winter, and he's probably not going to be able to recover. So I really support our party's plan to subsidize these businesses' rent for 6 months so they can just get through this winter. And then also we're looking at a rent subsidy for individuals who pay more than 30% of their income on rent. Because the fact is, those small businesses I'm talking about, their employees are the ones who are struggling with their rent. You can't run a business if there's nobody to mind the shop. So we need to target all our resources to those groups immediately. We should have done it yesterday.
Ms. Merrifield, 60 seconds.
First and foremost, it's about the pandemic and how everyone's feeling in terms of fear and health. The second thing is the fear that comes from not knowing how we're going to actually make it out of this economic mess that we're in right now. And the BC Liberals are the only ones with a strong economic plan on a move forward basis. But thirdly, it's the cost of living, what it actually has gone to over the course of the last 3.5 years. And so we're committing to things like ICBC and lowering the cost of insurance for everyone, whether it's small business or whether it's an individual person. The PST, which is a regressive tax, will put $1,700 on average back into our average income earners' pockets, $500 for a minimum wage worker. But then we've got the removal of the small business tax, as well as the restaurant and tourism industry.
Thanks very much. And that concludes the first section. And those were relating to current BC Chamber and Kelowna Chamber policy. And to note, we are formulating more of it to the Canadian Chamber that will be participating online, trying to promote issues that are important for the business community in the Okanagan. That's coming up in about a week or so. So we'll keep you posted on that. We're going to switch now to our second section, which is questions that have been provided from our various stakeholders and partners as we've collaborated together to make today's forum possible. And we are going to begin with our title sponsor that has helped us out financially put this and these forums together, and that's our representative from the Okanagan Mainline Real Estate Board. We're going to hear from Chair Kim Heinzman.
Many owners of strata properties in BC have faced unprecedented increases in their insurance premiums, dramatically impacting affordability and causing challenges with purchases and sales of strata units. While this is a complex issue, one recommendation from BCREA is to provide more training to Strata Council members so that they can make more informed decisions to reduce the risk of major claims in their buildings. Would your party support making such training mandatory?
So a very specific question. I want to thank the Okanagan Mainline Real Estate Board for helping out. Comment on that issue that certainly has been raised and has drawn a fair bit of attention. We'll begin for a minute and a half.
Okay. Well, thanks. Strata insurance is a huge issue. It first came up when dealing with a subsidized seniors housing project that we are currently in the development stages for, and that was brought to our attention, was the cost of Strata insurance and where it has gone. Upon further insight and due diligence, we've discovered that in some cases we've seen Strata insurance go up by almost 1,000%. OMREB is correct that this is a huge issue and it affects the affordability of stratified units. BC Liberals have not come out officially with word, but would I support training as of this nature? Absolutely. I think Strata councils in general and Strata managers really need ongoing training to make sure that they are getting the best cost effectiveness on the whole for their stratified residents. And I think that I would strongly support that initiative.
Excellent. Ms. Poon, 60 seconds.
Changing the Strata insurance, making it more affordable, is one of our party platform items. Before I met my husband, going into a condo or strata was the only option for me as a single person. It has skyrocketed, and Kelowna is particularly bad. When I was talking to my friends that live in some of these older strata units, this is an impact of when you cut costs and when you deregulate. There are a lot of units that were poorly built in this town, and insurance is increasing because they have leaks, they have drafts, they have mold. So sometimes when you cut costs on the top, those costs again are paid for in the future by the end user. So we do need to look at those costs, but we need to understand why they're so high as well and how we can build quality over quantity. As for training, absolutely, but I believe in choice. The BC Green Party is an evidence-based party, so I would want that training developed in conjunction and consultation with stratas and a number of different sources, because if it's only coming from one perspective, it's not going to be good training. And so I think we really need to bring a lot of people to the table if we're going to do that.
Great, thank you. Our next question from our stakeholders, and actually the couple here, will be on in the area of agriculture. And we want to thank our partners. This is an extremely important sector for us as a community and for our economy. Agritourism could be and has been identified as potential growth and big business for Kelowna. Though there are restrictions, often they're contradictory between levels of government, between the provinces and local governments, particularly around land use and creativity on ALR land. Would you work to change that? Do you see an opportunity to unleash economic opportunities in agritourism? And Ms. Poon, we'll begin with you for a minute and a half.
For a number of years, I was an operator of an urban farm in Kelowna. We wanted to enter farming, but we didn't have access to land or capital, so we used people's front and backyards. And so that was actually a really innovative way that we did succeed in. But even then, it is a very tough industry. So our BC farmers are getting 12 cents for 36 cents cost for apples currently. And so we do need to look at expanding agritourism and going into value-add markets, such as some of our orchards are going to cider. We have to develop that sector, and I am in support. But big picture, we need to really look at the poor leadership that have backed our farmers into that corner. We have a bully in the United States, and we've often been dealing with bullies in the United States. And I've always been someone to stand up to bullies. And the reasons why we can't compete with those Washington farmers is because we are subsidizing their industry by sending them our surplus electricity. The Columbia River Treaty was up for negotiation in 2014, and we need leadership in government to really be bullish and bearish in that and come to the table with a strong negotiating tactic that doesn't back our industry into a corner. And that goes for our forestry workers and our agriculture. So yeah, we should promote agritourism and those niche and those value add, but we need to look at the big picture too.
So aside from promoting, just for clarity, and the question deals with actually changing land use regulations, would you be, or in the party if elected, be open to changing regulations to give greater flexibility to allow agritourism?
Yeah, because there's so many loopholes. The fact is, one of the items that we're looking at with ALR reform is banning foreign speculators. What happens is people are just growing hay and they're not actually producing. They're just sitting on the land. So we do need to do different land use reforms. We need to do it so that people can't exploit those loopholes to take money out of our country.
Okay, thank you. And on this issue? Ms.
Well,
Merrifield.
my family hails from Alberta and are farmers. And I've watched over the course of the last 3 generations, they have been more innovative and have been more profitable than ever before. Our farmers here are unfairly disadvantaged, and we need to stop that. They deal with 3 levels of government that are introducing a layering effect of regulation and cost without giving them the opportunity to really maximize the use of their properties, but also the use of their innovation. So we, as the BC Liberals, would absolutely get rid of some of the discriminatory processes and policies of the NDP against farmers, but we would also really strongly encourage our farmers to utilize their rights and freedoms as farmers and get out of the way and make sure that they are able to earn a livelihood that is acceptable. In addition to that, it's also that municipalities have given unfair advantages from one to another, and we need to stop what's being done on a municipal level to some of those farmers.
Thank you. And the next question, we revert now for the first response from Ms. Merrifield, and this is also agricultural related. BC provides the lowest level of financial support for agriculture, measured as a percentage of agricultural GDP. That's within the national context. Canada has one of the lowest support levels of agricultural support for developed countries. Growers feel this makes them uncompetitive, and some of you have touched on this already, and worse, places them at greater risk as they take on debt compared to their competitors in other countries where more supports are offered. How would your party, in specific terms as best you can, if elected, address the competitive impact of doubly low agricultural support in this province? We'll start with Merrifield.
Well, one of the issues is even in their crop insurance, which is provincially legislated. You know, we've introduced a layering of difficulty for them to access it. We've done it in an aggregate format across all of their products, rather than looking at cherries. You got really hard hit this year in cherries. We're going to help you out, and we're going to make sure that you're around next year. If we don't start taking our food security seriously, as the pandemic has shown us, we're in for some really, really difficult times. And bolstering our farming industry absolutely needs to be A1 in terms of how we move forward. They're not looking for a handout. They're looking for a hand up in terms of how they can actually move forward. The other thing is really exciting, and this comes down to branding our Okanagan, Kelowna agriculture, and really celebrating that worldwide. That's a provincial initiative that could take place across the world in terms of celebrating who we are, celebrating our technologies, celebrating some of our practices, which are some of the greenest in the world, and really giving people a sense of pride that they get to eat that BC apple or have that BC cherry. So I am very excited about how we can bolster and help our farming industry and agricultural industry for our future, but also for theirs.
Thank you.
The Green Party have Food Security BC as a policy that we drafted and developed, and it's part of our platform, and we will continue to push it if you give us the opportunity. As a farmer, I actually paid very little taxes. It's just that competitive marketplace with product flooding in from the United States and China, places with less in labor practices, with poorer standards. The solution, though, isn't to deregulate so that we can compete, because we do need to protect health and safety. But we do need to support innovation for those farmers, and we need to really push supporting BC. So a friend of mine was in the hospital recently getting a surgery, and he opens his apples that are wrapped in plastic, and it says made in China. So perhaps we ship those apples all the way to China. They process it because they can pay people nothing. And then those fresh apples are back in our Kelowna General Hospital. And it was decades of procurement contracts under the BC Liberals that make sure that we are closing our packing plants in the Okanagan. There's some all around us where we're here, so that it's cheaper. So we need to process and invest in packing plants in this community.
All right, so let's pick up on that. And if I could, about 30 seconds, and I'll give each of you. because you broach into a subject of trade. And it's interesting as we listen to the U.S. presidential election, there's much about how we're going to protect American jobs. And I, for one at least, and many of us have been around for a while, I haven't seen a presidential candidate ever not protect the best interests of America, and they are a major trading partner. So how do we approach that? And in specific terms on the agricultural side, and in the context of the role of the provincial government, some of this deals with the federal government. So how would you address some of those? Ms. Poon, you make mention of China. We also are aware of product being dumped into BC from the U.S. How would you see your role or the provincial role, given some of this is a federal issue?
So leadership has to start with the government. How do we expect consumers to consume our way to supporting local suppliers if the local governments and the provincial government don't support local? So by investing in local processing packing plants, so those apples don't have such a long journey to China, and creating jobs in our community and supplying our hospitals and schools with locally produced, made in BC products, that's how we support our local producers. And I know there are some issues around isolationism, and I know that our bargaining power has been weakened by decades of poor negotiation on the part of previous leadership. But when you're dealing with a bully, you have to meet them where they're at. So we need stronger negotiation. They do have more chips on the table than we do, but we need to go all in and just take that gamble of supporting our suppliers, because they are we represent them, we work for them.
Okay, and very quickly, if you could.
I'm proud of what the BC Liberals were able to accomplish in the time in government in terms of trade and in terms of energy. We have helped to lower the world's emissions and greenhouse gases by getting LNG to our Asian partners. And we need to continue to advocate for those trade negotiations and trade partnerships. But it also is a BC first. It's a BC first on jobs. It's a BC first on processing. And that's something that we need to reclaim back, whether it's with our wood products or whether it's with our food or whether it's our oil and gas. We need to make sure that we're processing locally and make sure that we incent BC first.
Excellent. Thanks very much on a quick response on that issue. I appreciate it. And the flexibility of our team here making adjustments on the clock so we can delve a little deeper on that one subject. The next question, and I believe we're starting with Ms. Poon on this one, with respect to tourism and hospitality. If elected, how will you work with the meetings and events sector within the confines of public health and safety measures that would allow for a professionally organized, larger scale event at selected venues around BC to prevent a complete collapse with this sector? And let me add to that, there is an observation that's made. While we respect jurisdictions in BC, the approach in BC is not the same that's been adopted across the country by other provincial jurisdictions. So this sector in particular, from a tourism, how important it is for us, large scale events, event sector, if you could. For a minute and a half.
Yeah, and I should mention I do work for the public health authorities. So respecting Dr. Bonnie Henry's guidelines are very important for me, because as an analyst who has seen the behind the scenes data of testing and seen the hard work and the money that goes into our pathologists and our nurses and our physicians, I have been involved in some of the COVID setups, COVID clinic setups. So we can't disregard that work, but we do need to bolster the tourism and hospitality industry. And that is why the Green Party is investing in grants. So we do need to get through this winter. I'm someone that, knowing how slow winter is, I stay here. I don't go down to Palm Springs and I don't leave the country. I bundle up and I go to the theater. I go to the performance, I see live music. And it's actually mentally very challenging for me to not have that as part of my life. That's my mental health, is the arts. So we need those grants, and we need to work closely with the health authorities so that we can do those things safely. But the interesting thing to note is I was contacting a lot of people to help with my campaign in the events and hospitality sector, and they said the weddings are happening even more. There's an urgency. People aren't waiting to get married in this climate. So people are doing events, and they're being really innovative, and we need to listen to what our local entrepreneurs are, what is the working that they're doing, and scale it up, support them. But I have to say, I'm really impressed by what people are doing already with or without us.
Ms. Merrifield?
Well, the BC Liberals actually hired Dr. Henry, and we've been proud of supporting her through keeping us safe. Having said that, we need an economic plan as to how to get forward from where we are. And I believe in the resiliency of the Okanagan, the resiliency of those in Kelowna. And we need to lean in and listen to what can be done. We're sitting in a facility today that is, created out of necessity, that's created out of a disruption and a pivot. We need to do that with our large events as well. What can we do? How do we do them safely? Is there a possibility of doing something in a different way? Is there, do you bring all of the speakers together and keep everyone else separate? But we need to support our tourism and our restaurant industry right now, and in large part, some of these larger venues that we have coming to fruition.
Great, thank you. That takes us through our questions that have been provided by our various partners and stakeholders and moves us to our last section. In this section, we will have 6 questions. And in this, we will take the same approach. We'll have a minute and a half and then a minute to respond. And we'll move through these as quickly as we can. We're doing pretty good for time so far. The first question, and I believe we'll start with Ms. Merrifield. Aside from short trips into the interior this past weekend by both the NDP leader and the BC Liberal leader, not aware whether your leader has been through, though there might be some virtual, so you can jump in and correct me if I'm off the mark here. Most of the time has been actually focused on Metro Vancouver and major projects. There has been an announcement by parties to make major investments in infrastructure in the Lower Mainland. Would this be taken just as a result of a short campaign and the factor of a pandemic? Or are we seeing tangibly a growing urban-rural divide in this province where greater focus is on the highest populated area to the potential detriment to regions outside the Lower Mainland? So we'll begin observations on this campaign and the impact of ridings like this.
The BC Liberals have always been very attentive to the rural. In fact, when we talk about a rural-urban divide, oftentimes that's across party lines. And the BC Liberals are more in the rural areas because of our support for small business, and that's no different. While there hasn't been a major infrastructure project announced, there has been the removal of PST, the removal of small business tax. That directly affects who we are here. It saddened me that we don't have an NDP candidate who decides to come and have this fulsome dialogue. I'm proud of the two of us who are here to debate it, but in no way is the BC Liberals not paying attention to who we are in Kelowna and who we are as an Okanagan. In fact, just the opposite. I would say we're part of their heart. We're part of who they are, and we're helping to increase the amount of dialogue and the amount of policy that is actually coming to fruition. And over the course of the last 3.5 years, Andrew Wilkinson, our leader, has been in this riding many, many, many times, more times than I could even count in terms of me sitting around a roundtable discussion, oftentimes held by the chamber. And when I think about the dialogue that's happened around those tables, and I look at who we are as a policy platform coming out today, we've listened, he's listened. And who this is largely in direct response to how the rural communities have fared. Having said that, we are in a snap election that was called less than 4 weeks ago, and we are running to the finish line. And there are some swing ridings that the leaders are spending more time in right now.
Great. Thank you.
I'm the living embodiment of the rural-urban divide. I lived, as I said, on the rural Bible camp at West Kelowna. After that, we lived in Joe Rich. Joe Rich doesn't have cable. You chop your own wood to heat it. After that, I was looking for the big city life, so I did live I went to UVic, so I lived in Victoria, Vancouver, then I lived in South Korea, very urban. But I've come back to my roots, and during my campaign, a lot of people I grew up with and went to fishing camp with have been helping me on my campaign. This is a very grassroots campaign, and it representing those rural people who respect the land and fish and hunt and farm. That's who I am. When it comes to the other parties, I agree. The NDP not even being here because they believe their resources are better spent where they statistically can get better votes. But when it comes to the BC Liberals, I think they have considered this a safe riding, and they only pay lip service. They care more about schools and tunnels in the Lower Mainland than our bridges and roads and schools that we need. Rutland Middle School has been sitting there the same as when I was a teenager.
Thank you very much. And I will add to that that we've faced challenges like many. Chambers of Commerce have traditionally been involved, likely for more than 100 years, of bringing those that are seeking public office together for dialogue. And potentially that's been a bit of a casualty in the short time frame, but we felt it was important that we reach out, make some investment to bring this possibility together, using some innovation, and thanks to our team at SW as well. So again, thanks for your participation in this. So the next question that we've received from one of our members, and this relates to chamber policy. The Kelowna Chamber was, and we'll start, Ms. Poon, with yourself, policy provincially and nationally at the Canadian Chamber AGM, and conversely at the BC Chamber. They called on both the provincial and federal governments to invest more funds in the development of the aerospace industry, particularly in regional centres like Kelowna, where there are indicators of potential growth in a particular cluster, where you have an international airport like YLW, where there is major private sector investment, as we have with KF Aerospace, and where there is close proximity to research and development through collaboration with post-secondary institutions like the University of British Columbia in the Okanagan. This was endorsed almost unanimously at the Canadian Chamber. And now we face, as a result of COVID, a sector that has been massively impacted. Now with COVID-19, and given what it's done to the aerospace, broad sector individually and across that, it's not just about airlines. There are other aspects of it that impact the aerospace. What do you believe that is necessary to address the concerns of the aerospace, get it back on track in both the short term and the long term?
KF Aerospace really embodies the kind of innovation and forward economic growth that the Green Party supports. And I was very sad to hear that 150 employees have been laid off. Actually, a friend of mine, her husband is an engineer there, and he's been offered all kinds of new employment opportunities down in the United States, down in Tucson. And not only do they cover your costs of living, your relocation costs, they're doubling the wage. And of course, that has to do with less regulation. So this is a really good example of an industry where targeted tax cuts and targeted relief and subsidies is needed, because this is an essential service. It's a job creator. I would like to see some more green innovation to ensure that we are using fuel in a more sustainable manner in the aerospace, but that's what those people do. So we need to talk to that industry, but we need to look at what they're doing in the United States and why they're poaching all of us workers. So they're seeing an opportunity down south of all these qualified employees, people that have studied in Kelowna, and they own property here. I want those people to stay in Kelowna, not only because they're my friends, but our community benefits. So we need to invest in those workers, but we need to invest in those industries so that they can pass those investments on to those employees so that we don't lose them.
Thank you, Ms. Merrifield, on the issue of aerospace.
Absolutely. So I think that my Green colleague has spoken about a number of really important things. Number one, jobs. There are great paying jobs in the aerospace industry, and there's great paying jobs at KF Aerospace. We need to support this as a sector. But the other thing that comes out of what we have here in this almost supercluster is the research and technological innovation that takes place. You mentioned UBCO and Okanagan College and the collaboration that's done with KF Aerospace. I would add there's also a research district in that entire area that industry can come and participate. So it's not just KF Aerospace. We actually get the benefit of many other technological advances with other companies coming in. People need people, and we're not going to see a huge and dramatic change in the aerospace industry after we're through this pandemic. Will it take a while to recover? Absolutely. Will we see some changes? Absolutely. Will we do things better than we did before? Absolutely. But we need to make sure that that industry is around for when we're through this.
So if I could, just a quick response on this issue for 15 seconds or so, up to 30 I'll give you. And I want to follow up, but we'll begin here with something that was mentioned with respect to a bit of a brain drain and loss of opportunity when you have a downturn in a particular sector. Is that a concern that you see in this sector, that even once COVID, because if we're losing some of these to other jurisdictions, do they come back? So what would you see if that's an issue to respond to that, to ensure that those that brain drain, as referenced, doesn't occur?
So people don't want to move if they don't have to. They're not going to move if they have that job. And we need to make sure that our best people aren't poached. Is it difficult to get them back afterwards? It sure is. It's very, very difficult. As difficult as it is to get them to move in the first place, which is why we need to support this industry. We need to backstop it and make sure that those jobs are there.
Ms. Poon, very quickly.
We need to compete in the labor market. So, and we do that by investing in KF. But my friend who I talked to, she said, why wouldn't I go down to Tucson? The weather is beautiful. Our kid is young enough that he's not going to get too attached. They're going to pay for all of our expenses. So how do we compete with that? And it's really a simple labor equation. This is a supply and a demand question. And when you are in short supply as a qualified worker, you're going to go where the demand is because you're going to follow the money. And these are 3-year contracts, 2-year contracts. You know, these folks can easily rent the homes that they own here and come back, but we need to attract them and keep them. We can.
They can with speculation tax.
we might look at that and explore that of, you know, what strategies would you have if elected to actually prevent that from occurring? And we have a couple questions later on, so we'll get to that a little bit deeper. The next one that we have that was submitted by one of our members, and this one's a lot shorter. If elected, and we'll begin, I believe, Renee, or with Ms. Merrifield, we're with you. If elected, will your government improve access to childcare by introducing measures to strengthen private and non-profit childcare options using public options to fill the gaps in childcare?
Absolutely. The BC Liberals have come out with a very aggressive plan to invest over $1 billion in making sure that we have childcare. Not just $10 a day childcare, which we have also agreed to and support and believe in, but moreover, 10,000 new spaces. When I started my company 22 years ago, I actually had a 1-year-old son. I had a daughter that was on the way and a third son that was born a year and a half later. I needed childcare. And without it, I basically took my kids to meetings. I did what anyone could when you're bootstrapping and starting your own company, and that was survive. But the first 5 years that I actually brought home an income, my childcare cost me more than that first 5 years. So we need to get serious. It's taken us way too long to support women in the workforce. The other aspect to this is that economists across the board agree that women have been harder hit in the pandemic. More women are opting out of the workforce and staying home. I don't like this. And actually I got called out on Facebook. You know, Renee, you said mothers. And I said, I did. But that's only because that's what's happening right now, not because I believe it's what should happen. We need better parental supports. We need more childcare spaces, and we need to make sure that it's done so in an affordable way, but that those spaces are there. And the BC Liberals are committed to all of those.
Ms. Poon?
Sonia Firstenow is an early childhood educator. She also was a high school teacher. She was a child of a single mother and herself became a single mother. Myself, I was a kid of a single mother. So early childhood education is absolutely on our platform as a key investment, but we don't want to start, land and capital is so hard to access, especially in Kelowna. So our plan will bring early childhood education into the public school system. A problem in Kelowna is also shuttling your kids around. Most of us don't get off work at 3, and it's really hard to ship your kid from school to the before and after school childcare option. I don't even own a vehicle. I've had to actually get my N to drive my 9-year-old stepson. So it's challenging in many ways, and having that care at school will reduce costs, so it'll reduce building costs. We can throw some portables. I mean, growing up in Kelowna, I lived in portables my whole life as a student. And we can bring all those resources and everything from the lights to the internet. We don't have to pay double costs on those things if we include it in schools.
Great, thank you. The next question, we're halfway through this section. The last one was short, this one not so much. And we'll begin with Ms. Poon, just for the introduction. The City of Kelowna's 2019 Economic Scorecard benchmarked the city against 16 similar jurisdictions across the country, the United States, and even a couple overseas. The scorecard provided an evidence-based review of Kelowna's performance. Data was drawn from dozens of sources, and grades were issued on 24 indicators. Kelowna finished in the middle of the pack, 10th overall, a B grade for economic indicators, a C for social indicators. Among the areas identified as having room for improvement was the percentage of visible minorities where the city got a D grade. It just says the state we are in. It didn't express an opinion. Given the importance, though, that improving this grade, diversifying our communities, and how it will impact our competitiveness, labor force participation, and the regional economy, when the tail end of the baby boomers, me included, depart the workforce, if elected, what role do you think the provincial government should play in creating a more welcoming communities for newcomers in this riding, in this region? And Ms.
Well, I think,
Poon, you'll go first.
you know, for a long time when I was growing up, I was the most diverse kid. I'm half Chinese, and I never thought I looked that different, but I was the token ethnic kid. So the diversity is definitely an issue in Kelowna. And I think we really need to invest in making it easier for people to immigrate and replace our labor stock. A good friend of mine came from Syria. He is a refugee, and he's worked his butt off to get recertified as an accountant. He came as an accountant, and now he has a great job, bought a place, he's contributing. And you know, I just moved October 1st to a new place, and I talked to the guys who were helping us that we hired to move, and they were speaking Urdu, which my husband knows a little bit. They had four degrees between them, 2 PhDs, 2 masters, 2 bachelor degrees, and they're working as movers. They are environmental engineers, but because the credentialing process is so difficult, you have to start from scratch when you come here. We experience the same thing in healthcare. So we desperately need physicians, we desperately need nurses, and all of these practitioners, pathologists, and scientists, but we can't make them start university from scratch if they're coming here with a PhD. So we need to reform the credentialing process so we can get those people into our workforce.
Thank you. Ms. Merrifield?
I grew up in Southern California, and I was the minority as a Caucasian. And I have been in an industry where I've been a minority in terms of being a female in a male-dominated industry. But having said that, how do you welcome people into your economy? How do you welcome people into your community? Well, you give them a job, and you make sure that they have housing. And then you also create an education process for those that are there. I believe that we can do a lot as a BC government with agreements put into place with other countries who are looking for an immigration pathway for their citizens. And I think that we can create jobs that are required and make sure that people have housing that are available to them. But I also would agree with my Green candidate that we need to cross-credential, that we don't need more physicians or more surgeons that are working as minimum income jobs. We need to make sure that we can easily credential them and bring them up to standards. I disagree with our NDP candidate who's not here, in terms of more medical spaces. We need to just make sure that the ones that we have among us can survive.
So I want to pick up on that last question, and if I could, in 30 seconds or so in response, Ms. Merrifield, will begin with you and then go to Ms. Poon. Do you believe there is systemic racism in public institutions that need to be addressed? And if you're elected, would you take action on those?
I think there is. I think that racism exists, unconscious biases exist, and we need to do a lot to educate. We need to get rid of some ignorance and make sure that we have open, fair, amazing places and spaces for all to live and for all to be free. And I've had my attention drawn as a business owner to certain aspects of discrimination. And once your eyes are open, it's hard to unsee those aspects. And I think we need to do a better job as a society of really undoing some of that and educating ourselves.
I have no choice but to believe systemic racism exists because it's touched my family so deeply. On my father's side, my grandmother, her husband was stabbed. He walked out of a bar in Edmonton, and you can imagine Edmonton a couple decades ago, not as friendly as it is now. And he was stabbed for speaking a language that his murderer just didn't believe belonged in Edmonton. And she cleaned Greyhound bus depots after that, and she endured all kinds of slurs against her name, but she fought to put her kids through college. But her daughter also experienced slurs at college. She went to NAIT as a brilliant computer scientist, one of the first, but she dropped out and never recovered from her mental illness because of the traumas and the abuse that she experienced, and I have experienced it myself. So it is real, And I will say the man that stabbed my grandfather to death spent less time in prison than my father, who later went to jail for selling drugs trying to support the family. So does systemic racism exist? Absolutely.
So the next question, we'll build on that, partly because the question was around how do we take steps to ensure that we are a more welcoming community, a more diverse community in the generations to come. There was a survey that was completed by the BC Chamber of Commerce that asked businesses in the resource sector if they believed that this was a good jurisdiction for investment to take place. 4 out of 5 of those businesses felt currently that BC was not a good place for resource investment in the resource extraction and exports, et cetera. So if you could, and if we had the NDP candidate, we'd probably talk about current policy. Do you think the perception around this is fair, reasonable? What would you do to change this perception to ensure that BC is a jurisdiction that's open for investment, and that up to and including not just the resource sector, but to welcome new immigrants that see that as a path to immigration to Canada?
So that's a very complex way of staggering the question. But what I would say for the resource sector in particular is that we need government to give criteria that are more static for all. What's happened is almost a scope creep in terms of how bureaucracy is involved in getting everything from permitting to some of their plans through. We need to give them certainty. Without certainty, those billion-dollar investments just don't get made. And that's why Andrew Wilkinson and the BC Liberals have gone on record by saying we want another LNG plant in the north. We need it. We need our resource sector to be thriving in order for us to have an economy that's moving forward, in order for us to have technology and innovation that moves forward towards the green. Most of the resource sector executives that I've spoken with don't mind how green we are. In fact, they love it. They don't mind having the remediation plans that they do. In fact, they welcome it. But what they need is certainty in running their business, and a certainty with how many tradespeople that they can actually have work with them. So that again is another way that, you know, with our NDP colleague, they've narrowed that scope to only 15% of all of the different tradespeople that we have are eligible for government jobs. That's wrong. And we need to open that up to fair competition for all, including the other 85% and including immigrants who come and want to work in the trades.
Thank you, and if you need me, my apologies, because I did
Well, I agree that question is kind of
so
two issues in one
like,
question, so it's the right, I think we need more time for that one.
And I appreciate the observation. There was
I'll
the
just
general
tackle it.
observation of, is BC a good place for foreign investment, particularly in the resource sector, and how is that a real perception?
We've been relying on foreign capital for too long. We've had this branch plant economic view of Canada as you know, poor Canada needs to beg for their investment. Well, we are in a mightier position now. And I agree that BC is not a good place to invest if you're running a dinosaur-like business model. But I disagree that BC is behind in terms of innovation. One of the things that Sonia really stood up for in the BC Greens against the NDP, who we all are sad that they're not here, is we didn't want Site C because this is an American serving and a foreign corporation serving plan. We actually have a lot of incredible Indigenous and local businesses in resource extraction that are on the forefront of innovation. We don't want to flood our market with cheaper electricity and cheaper energy when we already have people in this community that have invested their own time and their own capital into really great solutions. So a business here that I admire is Gorman's Mill. It's at the foot of Glen Rosa, where I used to live. Businesses like that we need more of.
And just for clarity, you make reference to a dinosaur business model. In 15 seconds, could you define what you mean by dinosaur business?
Well, aside from actually relying on old dinosaurs to fuel your cars, there's also the fact that this model where Canada's just this, our home and native land that's just a blank slate, and we're just waiting for other foreign companies to come in, extract our raw resources, our raw logs, our raw gas and everything, bring it over to their plants because they can treat people less with more cruelty, they don't have human rights, and then ship us back inferior products. I think that's a dinosaur economy.
Great, thank you. literally and figuratively.
Yes, that's right.
Thank you for that clarity. We'll move to the next question. And Amanda, I think we begin with you for a minute and a half and then a response from Ms. Merrifield for about 60 seconds. If elected, would you support giving local governments more authority for revenue sources, taxation, as an example, as recently suggested by the informal group of urban mayors? Or do you think greater controls on municipal taxation should be in place, such as capping mill rates on non-residential properties, as suggested by some, limiting it to 2 or 3 times the residential rate, particularly as expressed by some businesses in the light of they pay more and use less public services and have no opportunity because the corporate vote was taken away many, many years ago? So if you could respond to that.
Yeah, so the Green Party doesn't believe in blanket statements. I think tinkering around the edges of things is really dangerous if you don't do it in a really informed and educated manner. If you just, reduce a regulation or shift things to the province or then shift it to the federal government, you end up with a lot of negative consequences. This is what we've seen during decades of the BC Liberal government. They have all outsourced and shifted responsibilities to the municipalities, especially in terms of mental health and social issues, but they have not rescinded the authority to make decisions. So we, on one hand, have this nanny state that says, these are your problems now, we've decentralized, but we're not giving local government the levers and the resources to actually manage that problem in a really smart way. And so we do need to look at that, but it's not something we can just say across the board without researching and doing our homework. But it is something that has had some success down in Washington. So places like Snohomish County, they actually have more local level powers of governance, taxation, and they're able to create models that work for a basically on-the-ground, made-at-home solution for your unique needs. I do support that, but I think you cannot go into it without doing a lot of proper research to make sure that transition doesn't leave people out.
Well, thank you. Ms. Merrifield?
So I don't have the BC Liberal policy on this particular issue, but what I could speak to is my own personal belief. And that is that the layering effect of taxation has long been far too onerous on small business and far too onerous on who we are as a community. So I would not be supportive of further taxation channels for municipalities. What I would be in favor of, and what I have seen in the BC Liberal platform, is a real concentration on incentivization of municipalities. We'll come behind you and give you more money to do things that are positive for the community and for the economy as a whole. We will also look at things like infrastructure projects and look at backstopping huge amounts of technological advances, whether that be green projects or waste to energy aspects of municipalities. So what I believe is not necessarily in more taxation, but in actually more creativity and more collaboration with provincial government.
Thank you. We have time to squeeze in 2 more, so we're going to do 2 more questions and then we'll give you concluding remarks. And we will begin this next one, Renee, with yourself for a minute and a half. What do you believe you would do if elected to address street crime issues in downtown Kelowna or other urban centers that is connected to the drug trafficking trade as an aspect of the opioid crisis, particularly when petty criminals are taking advantage of the homelessness issues in those that are facing drug addictions? What would you specifically do if elected, or your government would do to address, as an example, the mental health issues and other issues that are related to what is a complex issue?
Well, I think I've sat on almost every homelessness task force over the course of the last 15 years and worked with the Downtown Kelowna Association for 4 of those years. This is a really complex issue, but it is one that I believe as a society we can solve. We need to treat the causes, all of the causes. It's not a housing-only model. And if we look at the greats who are making some huge headway down south, if we look at their example of looking at data and making sure that we're tracking what services people are using, I think that we can actually provide better wraparound care. I do think that under the NDP government, when they deinstitutionalized certain aspects of our mental health care, we lost the baby with the bathwater. And I do think we need to provide those wraparound services desperately required by those that are mentally ill and need help. I also think, though, that we need to protect from harm. And that means creating a safe society. It also means not allowing those that are criminally intentioned to prey upon our homeless. And to really, we wouldn't do that if, my mother-in-law, with Alzheimer's, we wouldn't send her out into the street and say, best of luck to you. Why would we do that with those that are mentally ill? This is a massive issue, and one that the BC Liberal government is taking very seriously and promises to do great things with.
Well, it was under the BC Liberal government that Riverview Psychiatric Hospital was dismantled, and Rich Coleman's plan was to monetize that site because it is a very beautiful riverfront view. But we also saw a 70% reduction in mental health workers and supports. At that point, we had a mental health advocate, and that position was terminated. We also had a watchdog at UBC that would have monitored opioids before they hit the street. But applying these small shopkeeper economic type of thinking, they thought, well, deregulation is good. They also accepted quite a number of pharmaceutical donations. In fact, a big pharmaceutical company, one that is named in the class action suit that the NDP have launched against opioid producers, actually funded the 2016 BC Liberal Convention. So the drug dealing doesn't just happen from the criminal agents. It also happens within big corporate, big pharma, and it happens because of lobbying. And so the key piece of legislation that we passed was to remove those lobbyists from donating to our campaigns so we can run fairly.
So that is a issue. If you could provide more clarity just in not looking back, but looking forward, the green approach and your approach?
Yeah, so I myself, because of my family history, my personal volunteering, I support decriminalization of drugs because we have to remove the profit motive out of the black market. We need to move this back into the medical realm. It costs 70 grand a person to keep an inmate in jail, and that is where drugs flow freely, which I know from my father living in the jail. That is a center of drug trafficking and organized crime. So decriminalization, bring it back to health.
Okay, thank you. The last question that we have is a fairly straightforward one. And we've actually given, if you were watching earlier, you might have seen it. What exactly, and one example would be great. What exactly would you do as a high priority, if elected, to change the quality of life for residents within your riding, where you would focus on? And I believe we start with Renee on this one to wrap things up.
Well, the BC Liberals are pretty big on this one. They're going to eliminate the PST, immediately putting between 500, 1,700 into everyone's pockets. The other thing that we're going to do is open up ICBC to healthy competition. My son pays $4,800 for car insurance and would have to take a bus 2 hours and 20 minutes to get to school every day. So we need some solutions for people that are here locally. But other things like making sure that we have great jobs, making sure that we have industries moving forward, and making sure that we have healthcare and mental health supports that we desperately need. So I would definitely make everything more affordable and make sure that our cost of living is going down.
Great, thank you.
In healthcare, there's something called the social determinants of health. Health really is the most important thing for most of us. We can't thrive, we can't make money and do any of the other things we love to do if we're not healthy. And so one of those indicators, those social indicators, is poverty. So our platform includes basic income supports. It includes subsidies for rent. And we're basically supporting the bottom line of our society, those who are so close to being one paycheck away from being homeless. I looked at my receipts because I was curious about this PST. I didn't pay PST for a week. There is no PST on essential goods anyway. If you're shopping at the farmer's market, you're buying used things, you're buying locally made things, kids' clothes, books, newspaper, bicycles, you don't pay PST. So my dishwasher just broke, so I will pay PST on that. But I can live with washing my dishes by hand. I've done it most of my life. So we focus on the people who really need it. And by improving the lives of those individuals, we're going to have less of the social problems that the whole community is really concerned about.
All right, that concludes our questions. I want to thank both of you for the depth of the conversation and the broad issues that we've covered that are important, not just to the constituents in this riding, but all British Columbians. So thanks very much. I will advise those that have joined us, just as we had mentioned earlier, but if you've joined us late, we did reach out for more than a week to have participation by the NDP candidate in this riding. Unfortunately, despite looking at alternative dates, times, and venues to allow electronic participation, there was a choice not to participate. But I do want to thank both of you, Ms. Merrifield and Ms. Poon, for showing today and participating in a lively discussion covering a broad spectrum of issues. So thanks very much. And we want to wish you well and the best of luck in the upcoming election.
Thank you.
So to wrap things up, we do have a final thank you that we need to get to. But before we do that, we're going to do concluding remarks. I wanted to give you a bit of time to take a breath before the final minute. We began with Ms. Merrifield on opening remarks. We'll conclude with closing remarks with Ms. Poon. Ms. Poon?
Well, this phrase is a cliche, but we are living in unprecedented times. And in times like these, we need to move forward, and we need to move forward with clear, new, fresh vision. We cannot afford to give either the BC Liberals or the NDP 100% of the power. The BC Green Party has shown ourselves able and willing to collaborate across party lines, because we don't work for union donors, we don't work for corporate donors, we work for the people of British Columbia. I will work for the people of Kelowna. I will work for the neighborhoods that I've lived in and worked in for so many years. And without a third-party voice at the table, we end up with these extreme positions that leave a lot of people out in the middle. So we need more green voices, voices like mine, to bring reason, ideas, but also collaboration to this process so that everyone is represented in the policies we create to move us forward past these crises that we face.
Okay. Ms. Merrifield?
Well, most of us are employed by small businesses. In this community, it's the lifeblood, it's the backbone of who we are. And yes, we are in a pandemic, and I apologize that we're having to host an election in such strange times. But a vote for me is a vote for our economy. It's a vote for a pathway forward. It's a vote for lowering your cost of living and making sure that you have enough money to afford the necessities of life. But it's also a vote for your business, to make sure that you can make it through this pandemic and make it forward into increased opportunity, increased hope, increased trade relationships, and really a better Okanagan and a greater Kelowna-Mission riding. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And if we were with a live audience, this would bring applause. Next time we'll have sound effects for you. Thanks again for both of you. That does wrap up our second of 3 live debates. Forms for the 3 Kelowna ridings, Kelowna West, Kelowna-Mission, and Kelowna Lake Country. For those of you that have joined us live, you can also join us at 3 o'clock this afternoon, as we'll have 4 candidates from Kelowna Lake Country that will be going a little deeper dive into the various issues that impact that constituency, as well as issues that are impacting us both provincially, and likely we'll get into some issues with local government and the federal government as well. I do want to thank and acknowledge the wonderful team here at SW Event Technology. We couldn't have done this without their support along the way. They've done a great job working through the cameras and behind the scenes. So thanks to Cal and the entire team here. They've done a great job. I also want to acknowledge my team at the Kelowna Chamber. We're a federally incorporated nonprofit. We too have faced challenges with COVID-19, but I've been fortunate to be able to sit in front of you, but I have a great team behind doing a lot of work, so I do want to acknowledge Dawn Caroline Miller, who does policy, as well as Heather Kalman, who manages our member services. They've done a great job, as well as the rest of the team, in putting this together. And in final note, just to thank our supporting sponsors, our presenting sponsor, the Okanagan Mainline Real Estate Board, as well as the Fruit Growers Association, and our many partners that formulated the questions that were put to the candidates today. In closing, just want to remind you that this is indeed Small Business Week in Canada. So as you go forward, make sure you are kind, calm, be positive as best you can, and get out and show locals some love. Thanks very much for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you hopefully at 3 o'clock with the next All Candidates Forum.
Awesome.